Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wished like you had a real-time window into your own metabolism? What if you could actually know, moment by moment, whether your body is burning more fat or more carbs? Well, today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. A pretty fascinating handheld device called Lumen. We've sifted through quite a bit for this one. Research papers, validation studies, clinical trials, all discussing Lumen science, and, well, it's surprisingly broad applications.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to explore how this device works, check out the science behind it, see if it holds up, and then discover its potential uses, especially focusing on areas like prediabetes, BMI, and also women's health, which is quite interesting.
Right, and the core idea, basically, is that Lumen measures your metabolic fuel usage, what you're burning,
Right.
by looking at the CO2 in your breath. So maybe before we jump into the device itself, let's just quickly set the scene. What does metabolic fuel utilization even mean? Like, how does our body choose carbs versus fat?
That's a great starting point. The gold standard for measuring this sort of benchmark, it's not something you typically have at home. It's called indirect calorimetry. You often hear it called a metabolic cart.
A metabolic cart sounds serious.
It is, yeah. It's sophisticated stuff. It measures the CO2 you produce, VCO2, and the oxygen you consume, VO2, just from your breathing. And the ratio
Mhm.
between those two, VCO2 over VO2, that gives you the respiratory exchange ratio, or RER. That RER number is really powerful. It directly tells you the mix, the percentage of carbs versus fats your body's burning for energy right then.
Okay, incredibly precise, sounds like proper lab equipment. But I'm guessing there's a catch. Why don't we all have one?
Exactly, there's a reason. While it is the gold standard for accuracy, these metabolic carts have some pretty big limitations. They're really expensive. The whole measurement process takes a while, often up to 40 minutes for one good reading, and you only find them in specific lab settings. Plus, you need someone with technical know-how to run it and make sense of the data. Definitely not an everyday tool.
Right, makes sense. And this is where Lumen comes in, positioning itself as this innovative solution, right? Taking that lab insight and putting it, well, in your hand. It's small, it's portable, and it measures the percentage of CO2 in your exhaled breath.
That's it. It uses a CO2 sensor and also a flow sensor. These work together to figure out your CO2 production rate from just one breath maneuver. Specifically, it's a controlled 10-second breath hold.
Okay, so how does just measuring CO2 tell you about fat versus carbs?
Well, the underlying idea is pretty neat. Your resting oxygen consumption tends to be relatively stable, right? So assuming that's fairly constant, any changes you see in the CO2 you're producing point towards a shift in your fuel source. Basically, more CO2 means more carbs being burned, less CO2 suggests more fat burning, and the huge advantage is its convenience, it's portable, and you get that feedback instantly on a smartphone app.
Okay, so it sounds plausible, but how well does it actually stack up against that gold standard metabolic cart? Was there a study on that?
There was. A key validation study came out of San Francisco State University in 2021. Their whole aim was to evaluate Lumen's validity, head-to-head, against the metabolic cart. They had 33 healthy young adults, average age around 23. They measured them at rest twice, once after fasting overnight, and then again after they drank a solution with 150 grams of glucose, basically, a big sugar hit. The key question: could Lumen reliably detect that shift towards burning carbs after the glucose?
Get it. What did they find?
Yes, it performed very well. The results were quite clear. Both Lumen's percent O2 readings and the metabolic cart's RER significantly increased after the glucose. That was expected, of course. Both methods clearly picked up the shift towards burning carbs. Crucially, statistical analysis, specifically something called reduced major axis regression, showed a strong agreement between Lumen's percent O2 and the cart's RER.
Strong agreement.
Yeah.
So it works.
It works for its intended purpose. It's important to clarify, though. It showed strong agreement, meaning Lumen is very effective for monitoring your own changes, your individual metabolic responses over time. That within-subject consistency is key. It's not necessarily designed to be a direct, precise substitute for comparing absolute metabolic rates between different people in, say, a clinical trial setting, where the metabolic cart still reigns supreme for that kind of precision.
Okay, so it's more about tracking my personal metabolic shifts day to day rather than comparing my exact RER number to someone else's.
Exactly. That's the
All
power.
right, and here's where it gets really interesting. This means you can potentially get lab-level insights, if not exact lab-level numbers, right in your own home. So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, the power is in that real-time personalized feedback. Think about it. Having that kind of insight daily lets you see how your body responds to specific meals or your workout or even how well you slept. You're not just getting a single snapshot from a lab visit, you're getting a continuous dynamic view of your own metabolic journey. It lets you fine-tune things day by day.
Okay, that makes sense. And that leads us nicely into one of the really impactful potential applications, prediabetes management. Prediabetes is incredibly common, huge risk factor for type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. It's a big deal. And it's definitely an area where catching things early, intervening effectively, can make a massive difference.
Absolutely. And there was a pilot clinical trial on this from Tel Aviv Sourasky Medical Center, published in 2023. They specifically looked at Lumen's effects on things like weight, body fat, waist size anthropometric, and metabolic variables in adults who already had prediabetes. It was a 12-week study, single arm, meaning just one group, with 27 participants. They had specific criteria: age 25-65, BMI between 27 and 40, and importantly, an HbA1c that's the long-term blood sugar marker between 5.7% and 6.4%, putting them in the prediabetes range.
And what did the intervention actually involve? How do they use Lumen day to day?
Right, so each participant took a Lumen measurement every morning while fasted. Based on that reading, the Lumen app gave them personalized guidelines for their daily macros: carbs, fat, protein. The guidance focused on complex carbs, healthy fats, that sort of thing. And they also had support from Lumen coaches remotely, helping them stick to the plan over the 12 weeks.
Okay, so daily measurements, personalized food guidance, coaching. Did it work? What were the results after 12 weeks? These sound pretty compelling on paper.
They really were quite striking for a pilot study. They saw a significant decrease in body weight average loss, was almost 6 kilograms, which was about a 6.15% reduction from their starting weight. Significant. Also, a significant drop in percentage body fat, nearly 3%, and waist circumference went down by over 6 centimeters on average. But maybe the most critical finding for this group: their HbA1c levels decreased significantly by 0.27%. That's a meaningful improvement in blood sugar control. And there were other positive changes too: lower triglycerides, lower systolic blood pressure.
Wow, that's a whole suite of improvements in just 12 weeks. It really seems to connect to this idea of metabolic flexibility you mentioned.
Exactly. Metabolic flexibility is the body's ability to efficiently switch between burning carbs and fats. If your body gets stuck preferentially burning one fuel, like carbs, even when it should be burning fat, that's often linked to insulin resistance and problems like prediabetes. What's fascinating here is how that personalized daily feedback from Lumen, guiding those macronutrient adjustments, seemed to help improve metabolic control and flexibility. It simplifies assessing it.
So the Lumen feedback helped them understand when their body was ready for carbs versus when it might be better to focus on fats.
That seems to be the mechanism, yes. It empowered them to tailor their diet to what their metabolism was actually doing at that moment, rather than following generic advice. They could literally see the impact of their food choices. Now, we do need to be careful, acknowledge the limitations. This was a pilot study.
Right. Small number of people, only one group.
Exactly. Small sample size, single-arm design, so no control group for comparison, and relatively short duration, just 12 weeks. So while these initial findings are definitely promising, really promising, we absolutely need larger randomized controlled trials to confirm these results and really tease out Lumen's specific effect versus the coaching and dietary changes alone.
Okay, so promising start, but more research needed to be definitive. Understood. Now, if we broaden out from prediabetes, connecting this to overall health, body composition, how does Lumen relate to something like BMI or just general weight management?
Yeah, the insights definitely extend beyond prediabetes. Lumen's own internal research, looking at their user data, suggests a link. People who demonstrate better metabolic flexibility of their bodies, switch fuels, easily seem to process carbs more efficiently, and are less likely to store those carbs as fat. That's really the core insight for weight management, isn't it? It's not just about calories in, calories out. It's about what your body does with those calories.
So it's about metabolic efficiency, in a way.
You could put it that way. And their real-world usage data seems to support this. They found that Lumen users who specifically selected the healthy weight loss track in the app and who used the device more consistently, the highly engaged users reported greater weight loss. Some of those highly engaged users lost over 5% of their initial body weight.
That engagement piece is interesting. It suggests that having the data and acting on it is key.
Absolutely. It raises that important question. For you, the listener, how could understanding your own body's fuel use provide actionable insights for your weight goals? It could potentially shift the focus from just counting calories to understanding the type of fuel your body prefers at different times and how to work with your metabolism, not against it.
Okay, really interesting. Now, let's pivot to another area, one where metabolism is incredibly dynamic, but maybe less often discussed in this context. Women's health.
Yes, this is a fascinating application.
The menstrual cycle, menopause. These involve huge hormonal shifts that profoundly impact metabolism.
They really do, and understanding these shifts is crucial. There was a recent Lumen study from 2024 looking specifically at exhaled CO2 patterns during the menstrual cycle and in menopausal women. The aim was to see if Lumen could shed light on these metabolic variations using their large user database. It was a retrospective cohort study analyzing data from almost 4,000 women, some with regular cycles, amenorrheic, and menopausal women, both those using hormone replacement therapy, HRT, and those not.
Wow, nearly 4,000 users. That's a lot of data.
Yeah.
What did they find for women with regular cycles? Were there clear patterns?
Yes, very clear cyclical patterns in CO2 emerged. They found CO2 levels were generally higher during the menstrual phase, the estrogenic phase leading up to ovulation, and ovulation itself. This suggests increased carbohydrate burning during those times. Then CO2 levels tended to decrease during the post-ovulation, luteal phase, and the premenstrual phase. This aligns with an expected increase in fat burning, likely linked to the rise in progesterone during the second half of the cycle.
And did this pattern hold up even if cycles weren't exactly 28 days?
Apparently so. The overall pattern seemed consistent even across different cycle lengths, from 23 to 35 days. Interestingly, while BMI was positively linked to CO2 levels higher, BMI generally meant higher CO2. Things like age and the specific cycle length weren't major predictors of the CO2 level itself within the cycle pattern. It really points to the hormones as the main drivers of those cyclical metabolic shifts.
Fascinating. Okay, and what about menopause? That's an even bigger hormonal shift.
Right, and the study looked at that too. The findings there were also significant. They found statistically significant higher CO2 levels in menopausal women who were not using HRT compared to those who were using HRT. The HRT group showed lower CO2 levels.
Suggesting maybe HRT helps maintain a metabolic state closer to premenopause, perhaps related to progesterone.
That's the implication, yes. It suggests an association with the significant changes in progesterone during menopause and how HRT might influence that, impacting fuel utilization. It really highlights how CO2 monitoring, like with Lumen, could potentially be a tool for women to track their cycle non-invasively and gain insight into the metabolic changes happening during menopause.
It sounds incredibly powerful for personalized understanding. But you mentioned it was retrospective, using self-reported data. What are the caveats there?
Good point. Yes, like any retrospective study using self-reported data, there are limitations. You have potential inaccuracies in reported cycle dates or HRT status. Also, they didn't directly measure hormone levels, so the link between hormones and CO2 is an association based on known physiology, not a direct measurement in this study. Another limitation they noted was the exclusion of most women using hormonal birth control, HBC, as only a small percentage of their users identified as HBC users. So insights for that group are limited from this particular study.
Okay, important context, but still pretty unique insights.
Absolutely. Despite the limitations, it offers a really novel perspective using large-scale real-world data on how metabolism shifts during these key life stages for women. It underscores just how personalized metabolism is and how a tool like Lumen could help individuals track and adapt to their body's own natural rhythms and changes.
Yeah, it really drives home that personalized aspect. It makes you think, doesn't it? If we'd had tools like this readily available years ago, how might that have changed things for women navigating these transitions?
It's a powerful thought. It's about providing unique, actionable information about physiology that impacts daily life, allowing for more informed choices about nutrition, activity, tailored to those specific life stages.
Okay, so let's wrap up this deep dive. It's been fascinating. We've seen how Lumen aims to provide these real-time metabolic insights. We looked at its validation against the gold standard metabolic cart, showing it's effective for tracking individual changes in fuel use. We saw its potential impact in prediabetes, with promising results on weight, body fat, and that crucial HbA1c marker in the pilot study. We connected it to BMI and weight management, moving beyond just calories to what your body is actually burning. And finally, those really intriguing insights into women's health, tracking metabolic shifts across the menstrual cycle and through menopause.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is really the potential power of having accessible, real-time metabolic information. It opens the door to truly personalized health strategies. It's moving this kind of understanding out of the lab and potentially into everyday life for anyone wanting to optimize their health.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Imagine a world where understanding your body's daily fuel preference is as simple as taking a breath. How might knowing your metabolic state right now in real time actually empower your daily decisions about what you eat? how you move, your overall well-being. How could it help you truly optimize your unique health journey? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Lumen.